I was drowning in a mind-numbing work call, half listening to my manager ramble about quarterly projections and synergy when my phone buzzed. Jessica. I glanced at the screen. My wife wasn't much of a texter when she was out running errands, so I figured it was important. Jess, hey babe, I just got to your parents' place. Where did you say the box was again? Me. Storage closet next to the laundry room. Jess, which one? There are like 3 closets here. I sighed. Of course. Jess was the type of person who could open the fridge, stare directly at the butter, and still ask, where's the butter? Instead of playing text tag with her cluelessness, I just FaceTimed her. She picked up immediately, her face filling the screen. Her lips were glossy, eyeliner sharp, and her long dark hair was curled to perfection, like she was going out to dinner instead of picking up some random junk from my parents' house. I raised an eyebrow. Damn, Jess. You look nice. Who are you getting all dolled up for? She rolled her eyes with a little smirk. For myself, obviously. Uh-huh. She flipped the camera around as she walked through the house. I noticed she still had her shoes on, high-heeled boots, the kind she usually only wore for special occasions. That struck me as odd. Jess hated wearing shoes indoors, especially at my parents' place, because my mom had been a neat freak about the carpet. Okay, see the laundry room? I said, keeping my voice even. Turn left and... The camera panned across the living room, and that's when I saw it. A men's jacket draped over the couch. Not just any jacket. Dark navy. Wool. Looked expensive. Next to it, a matching tie rested on the armrest like someone had ripped it off in a hurry. My stomach clenched. Babe. I forced my tone to stay neutral. Whose jacket is that? Jess froze. For a split second. Just long enough for my stomach to drop. Then she let out a light laugh, casual as hell. Oh, probably your dad's. I frowned. That didn't make sense. My dad never left his jackets in the living room. He was one of those ex-military guys who treated his clothes like an extension of himself. Always neat, always put away. If he had taken off a jacket, it would have been folded on the back of a chair, not tossed over the couch like someone had just peeled it off in a hurry. And the tie? It wasn't my dad's style. My dad wore old man ties. Boring browns, predictable stripes. The kind of thing you'd find in a Kohl's clearance rack. But this one? Sleek. Modern. Trendy. Then it hit me. It looked like something my brother would wear. My chest went tight. Yeah. Weird, I muttered. Anyway, just grab the box and come home soon, okay? She nodded too quickly and hung up. I stared at my phone, my mind racing. What the hell was going on? Jess was supposed to be alone at my parents' house. My mom and dad were out of town for the weekend, visiting my aunt in Florida. And my brother lived 3 hours away. Or at least, he was supposed to. The jacket, the way Jess reacted. Something wasn't right. And if I knew one thing about Jess, it was this. She sucked at lying under pressure. I didn't even hesitate. I grabbed my keys and walked out the door. I wasn't about to sit around wondering. I needed to see for myself. I pulled up to my parents' house, cutting the engine and sitting in silence for a moment. My hands were gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles had gone white. Calm down. Think. I wasn't the jealous type. Never had been. But something about this situation didn't sit right with me. Jess had been acting strange for weeks. More distant. More secretive. And now this? A random men's jacket in my parents' empty house? No. I wasn't about to ignore my gut. I stepped out of the car, making sure to close the door quietly. I didn't want them to hear me coming. If this was nothing, if I was overreacting, I could laugh about it later. But if I walked in and found something I wasn't supposed to see, I needed proof. I moved carefully around the side of the house, heading for the back door. My parents never locked it unless they were leaving town for a long trip. A quick twist of the handle, and just like that, I was inside. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I crept through the hallway, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Then, from the living room, I heard it. Music. Not just any music. Slow, sultry, romantic music. I moved closer, stepping lightly until I reached the entrance of the living room. I stayed just out of sight, barely breathing as I peered around the corner. And that's when I saw them. Jess, my wife, dancing, barefoot, half dressed. Her sweater was gone, leaving only a lacy black that I had definitely seen before. The same one she usually wore when she wanted to feel safe. Her leggings were rolled dangerously low on her, and her bare feet moved slowly across the floor, swaying to the music. And my brother, sitting on the couch, spread, watching her like he was hypnotized. The same couch where I had just seen his jacket. I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. What the hell was I looking at? Jess giggled, moving closer to him, rolling her hips like she was putting on some kind of private show. And my brother, my own flesh and blood, just sat there, letting it happen. I should have lost it right then and there. I should have charged into that room and made them regret every single decision that led to this moment. But instead, I did something better. I pulled out my phone. I hit record, and I stood there, silently, collecting the kind of evidence that would destroy them both. Jess turned, tossing her hair over her shoulder, smiling as she swayed in front of him. "You like this, don't you?" she teased, her voice low, playful. My brother smirked. "You're trouble, you know that?" I clenched my jaw so hard I thought my teeth might break. I wanted to break something, but I forced myself to stay still. Jess giggled again, reaching for his tie, the same damn tie I had seen on the couch, and started tugging him toward her. And that was it. That was all I needed. I ended the recording. Then, without a sound, I turned around and walked right back out the way I came. I walked back to my car, my pulse hammering in my ears so loudly that I barely noticed the way my fingers trembled as I opened the door. My entire body was tense, my brain firing off every possible reaction at once. Rage, disgust, heartbreak. A part of me wanted to storm back inside, flip that damn coffee table over, and wipe the smirk off my brother's face with my fists. Another part of me, the colder, more calculating side, knew that there was a better way to handle this. A smarter way. Jess and my brother, Nathan, of all people, thought they could do this to me and just walk away? Thought they could sneak around behind my back, in my parents' house, and I'd just be too dumb to notice? No. I wasn't about to give them the satisfaction of catching me off guard. I pulled my phone back out, scrolling through my contacts until I found the number I needed. "Hey, Sam," I said as soon as my lawyer picked up, my voice controlled, steady. "I need you to start drafting divorce papers. Today. And make it airtight." There was a slight pause on the other end before Sam sighed. Do I even want to ask what happened? Just make sure I get everything. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. And I mean everything. Jess thought she was smart, thought she had me wrapped around her finger with her little lies, her fake affection, her bullshit excuses. But she didn't know who she was dealing with. By the time she even realized what was happening, it would be too late. Hanging up, I sat in the car for a long moment, staring at my own reflection in the rearview mirror. I barely recognized myself. My face was set in a look I hadn't worn in years, one of pure, ice-cold focus. This wasn't just about a betrayal anymore. It was about justice. By the time Jess got home that night, everything was already in motion. I played it cool. When she walked through the door, casually tossing her keys onto the counter like she hadn't just spent her evening grinding on my brother, I didn't let my expression change. "Hey, babe," she said, her voice just a little too sweet, a little too rehearsed. "Sorry I was gone so long. The traffic was insane on the way back." Liar. I had watched her for a full 20 minutes before leaving my parents' house. There was no traffic. The only thing that had slowed her down was how long it took her to peel herself away from Nathan. But I just nodded, giving her the same tired, clueless smile she was expecting. "No worries. Did you find the box?" She blinked, caught off guard for half a second, before recovering. "Oh, yeah, I got it. It was exactly where you said." I almost laughed. She was so damn confident that I had no idea what was going on, so sure that she was getting away with it. I let her keep thinking that. I didn't mention the jacket, didn't mention the music, didn't mention the way she had been dancing like she wasn't a married woman. I just let her go about her routine, pretending everything was perfectly normal. And then, while she showered, I got to work. By the time she left for her supposed weekend trip to visit her parents, I had already packed up every single one of her things. Her clothes, folded neatly in suitcases. Her jewelry, boxed up. Her toiletries, tossed in a bag. And the house? The locks were changed the second she pulled out of the driveway. She didn't know it yet, but she wasn't coming back. I spent the next few hours making sure every financial account we shared was locked down. Our joint credit cards? Canceled. Her access to the bank? Revoked. If she needed money, she could call her new boyfriend for it. And then, because karma has a sense of humor, I got a phone call that changed everything. It was my mom. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice shaking. "It's your father. He's been in an accident." My blood went cold. What? I stood up so fast my chair nearly toppled over. What happened? "It was bad," she whispered, her voice breaking. "He's in surgery now, but I don't know, honey. The doctors said it's critical." For a moment, I forgot everything else. Jess, Nathan, the betrayal, the divorce. None of it mattered, not compared to this. I grabbed my coat and ran out the door. I drove to the hospital with my grip locked on the wheel so tightly my fingers ached, my mind racing through every possible outcome. The last thing I had expected today was to get a call saying that my father had been in a serious accident, and the weight of it made my chest feel like it was being crushed from the inside out. I had spent the last few hours consumed with thoughts of Jessica and Nathan, drowning in the betrayal I had uncovered. But now all of that seemed to momentarily take a back seat to the only thing that truly mattered, whether or not my father was going to survive. When I arrived at the hospital, I spotted my mother sitting in the waiting area, hunched forward with her hands tightly gripping a tissue that had been twisted and wrinkled beyond recognition. Her eyes were red and swollen, and the moment she looked up at me, I knew that whatever had happened was worse than I had imagined. "Mom," I said as I sat down next to her, my voice low and filled with uncertainty because I wasn't sure I was ready for the answer. She swallowed hard, shaking her head slightly as though she was struggling to say the words. "It was a truck," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "A semi ran a red light, and he didn't even have time to react before it hit him." My stomach churned as I tried to process the information. I could barely wrap my head around the idea of my father, the strongest man I had ever known, lying somewhere in this hospital, broken and fighting for his life. I wasn't prepared for this. Not now, not ever. "He's in surgery," she continued, her hands wringing together in her lap. "The doctors said it's critical, and they don't know if—" Her voice broke before she could finish the sentence, and I reached out to squeeze her hand, needing to offer whatever comfort I could while barely holding myself together. Before I could respond, a familiar voice cut through the quiet tension of the waiting room, a voice that immediately reignited the anger that had been simmering just beneath the surface. Nathan had arrived, his tone thick with concern as he called out for our mother, moving toward us with quick, purposeful steps. For a brief moment, I didn't turn to look at him because I knew that if I did, if I allowed myself to see his face after everything I had discovered tonight, I might actually lose control and do something that would land me in a completely different kind of waiting room, one with steel bars and handcuffs. He sat across from us, and the three of us sat there in heavy silence, pretending for just a moment that we were still a normal family, waiting for news about the man who had raised us. My mother exhaled shakily before straightening her back and looking between the two of us. "We need to talk about the will," she said, her voice firm despite the grief weighing it down. I furrowed my brow, caught off guard by the sudden shift in conversation, and turned to look at her. "Mom, I don't think now is the time to." She shook her head before I could finish. "It is," she insisted, her tone leaving no room for argument. "If something happens to your father, you need to know what's coming." I finally turned my head toward Nathan for the first time since he had arrived, and the second I did, I noticed the way his entire body tensed, his jaw locking in place as his hands curled into tight fists. Something about his reaction felt off, and before my mother even continued, I had the sinking suspicion that he already knew exactly what she was about to say. She took a deep breath, clearly trying to steady herself before speaking again. "Your father and I made changes to the will last year," she explained, her voice slow and deliberate as she glanced at Nathan before looking back at me. After everything that happened with Nathan, a heavy silence fell over the room, and I felt my pulse quicken. I turned to my brother, watching the way his fingers twitched slightly against the fabric of his jeans, as if he was barely holding himself together. What about Nathan? I asked, my voice cautious, as if I already knew the answer but needed to hear it out loud. She hesitated, but after a long moment, she finally spoke the words that made everything fall into place. Your father left everything to you, she said softly. The house, the business, the land. Nathan doesn't get anything. The words barely had time to register before Nathan shot up from his chair, his entire face contorted with barely restrained fury, his voice sharp and biting as he practically spat out his response. That's not possible, he said, shaking his head in denial. That's a lie. I didn't react right away, but instead, I just kept watching him, absorbing every micro-expression, every muscle twitch, every little shift in his posture. He wasn't just angry. He was panicking. You knew, I said, my voice eerily calm despite the storm brewing inside me. You already knew about the will, didn't you? Nathan clenched his fists so tightly his knuckles turned white, but he didn't say a word, and that was all the confirmation I needed. A slow, bitter laugh escaped my lips as I leaned back against the chair, suddenly seeing everything so clearly. So that's what this was about, I murmured, shaking my head in disbelief. You weren't just trying to screw over my marriage. You were trying to destroy my entire life. Nathan's jaw tightened, and when he finally spoke, his voice was cold and full of resentment. You don't deserve it. I raised an eyebrow at him, genuinely baffled by the sheer entitlement in his words. And you do? His eyes darkened, his lips curling into a sneer as he let out a short, humorless laugh. I was always the better son, he muttered, his voice dripping with venom. And suddenly, everything clicked. Nathan had spent his entire life believing that he was the golden child, the one destined to inherit everything, the one our father would pass the torch to when the time came. But when reality didn't match up with his delusions, when he realized that our father had placed his trust in me instead of him, he had snapped. He hadn't just wanted to hurt me. He had wanted to ruin me. And the worst part? Jessica had been part of it. I inhaled sharply, every ounce of restraint I had left hanging by a thread as I stared at the man who was supposed to be my brother, the man who had spent God knows how long plotting my downfall. And as I sat there, feeling the full weight of the betrayal, one thing became painfully clear. Nathan hadn't just been after my wife. He had been after everything. The weight of my brother's words settled over me like a suffocating fog, thick with the realization that everything I thought I knew about him had been a lie. He hadn't just been driven by fleeting temptation or reckless impulse when he betrayed me with Jessica. This wasn't some drunken mistake, some lapse in judgment that could be excused as weakness. No, this had been planned, fueled by resentment that had been festering for years, perhaps even decades. Nathan had always seen himself as the superior one, the smarter one, the more charming one, the one destined for success while I was just the afterthought, the steady, responsible, reliable brother who had never sought the spotlight. But when he realized that our father hadn't seen him that way, that the man he had spent his entire life trying to impress had chosen me instead, something inside him had broken. And instead of proving himself in a way that actually mattered, he had chosen to tear me down instead. I exhaled slowly, every muscle in my body taut with restraint as I stared at him, forcing myself not to react, not to let him see how deep the knife had cut. If he wanted me to explode, if he wanted me to lose control and lash out, I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction. Instead, I let silence stretch between us, heavy and suffocating, letting him stew in his own bitterness. Nathan's jaw was still clenched, his fingers twitching slightly as if he was waiting for me to say something, waiting for me to give him an excuse to turn this into a fight that he could manipulate into making himself the victim. But I wasn't playing his game. Not now. Not ever again. You really thought this would work? I asked finally, my voice low and steady, barely above a whisper, but cutting through the tension like a blade. That screwing my wife and humiliating me would somehow change anything? Nathan scoffed, shaking his head, his lips twisting into something that might have passed for amusement if there wasn't so much hatred behind it. You always act like you're so much better than me, he muttered, his voice laced with venom. Like you're the responsible one, the worthy one. But you were never meant for any of this. You're not a leader. You're a damn placeholder, and everyone knows it. I tilted my head slightly, watching him like he was a puzzle I was finally starting to solve. Everyone? I echoed, raising an eyebrow. Or just you? Nathan's nostrils flared, and for the first time, I saw something flicker in his expression: uncertainty. He had spent so long convincing himself that he was the rightful heir, that our father had made a mistake, that I had stolen something that should have been his, that I wasn't actually worthy of the trust one had been given. But now, with the truth laid bare, with our mother sitting beside us, silent but firm in her decision, it was starting to sink in. This wasn't just his usual tantrum, his usual way of making excuses when things didn't go his way. This was real, and there was nothing he could do to change it. I let out a humorless chuckle, leaning back against my chair, crossing my arms over my chest as I studied him, as I let the power shift back into my hands. I almost feel bad for you, I said, shaking my head. You really thought you could take everything from me and walk away unscathed, didn't you? Nathan sneered. You think you've won? He snapped. This isn't over. I shrugged, my expression neutral. It is for you. His eyes darkened, but before he could respond, the sound of a door opening down the hall made all of us snap our heads toward the direction of the ICU. A doctor emerged, her expression neutral but tired, her gaze scanning the room before she settled on my mother. Mrs. Carter? She asked gently. My mother shot up from her chair so quickly it nearly toppled over. Yes, she said, her voice shaking. How is he? The doctor hesitated for just a fraction of a second before offering a small, measured nod. He made it through surgery, she said carefully. The next 24 hours are critical, but for now, he's stable. The breath I had been holding finally released, and my mother sagged slightly, pressing a hand to her chest as relief flooded through her features. Can we see him? She asked. The doctor hesitated. Only immediate family for now, she said. One at a time. My mother turned to me, then to Nathan, before her gaze landed back on me. You go first, she said, her voice soft but certain. Nathan's entire body stiffened at that, and I saw the moment his anger boiled over. The moment he realized that not only had he lost everything in the legal sense, but he had lost something far more important: the respect of our mother, the trust of our family, the very foundation he had built his ego on. And that was a wound that would never heal. I didn't even spare him another glance as I followed the doctor down the hall. I had bigger things to focus on now. My father was still alive, and that meant I still had time to tell him everything. Walking into my father's hospital room was like stepping into a place I wasn't ready to face, but I forced myself to keep moving, my steps slow and deliberate as I approached his bed. The sight of him, pale and motionless, connected to machines that beeped in steady rhythm, sent a wave of emotions crashing over me. This was the man who had built everything from the ground up, the man who had spent his entire life ensuring that our family had something real, something solid, something that would last for generations. And now, because of one reckless moment on the road, he was lying here, fighting to hold on. I pulled a chair up beside him and sat down, letting out a slow breath as I took in the reality of it all. His face was bruised, a thick bandage wrapped around his forehead, and I could see the way his chest rose and fell with effort. It felt unnatural to see him like this, so weak, so fragile, when all my life he had been nothing but strong. As I sat there, I thought about everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. The betrayal, the lies, the years of resentment that had finally come to the surface. Nathan had tried to take everything from me, and Jessica had helped him do it. The rage that had settled into my bones wasn't something that would just fade over time. It was burning inside me, fueling me, keeping me steady as I prepared for what had to come next. Because this wasn't over. Not even close. I reached out, gripping my father's hand carefully, mindful of the four taped to his skin. Dad, I said, my voice quieter than I had expected it to be. I don't know if you can hear me, but I need you to know something. I swallowed hard, steadying myself. I know about the will. I know that you left everything to me. And I know that Nathan. I paused, my fingers tightening slightly around his. Nathan knew too. And he He's been trying to destroy me for it. My father didn't stir, didn't react, but I kept talking, needing to say the words out loud, needing to make it real. He's been Jessica, I admitted, my voice flat, devoid of the emotion that had been clawing at my chest since I had seen them together. I caught them. At your house, of all places. He wanted to take everything from me. Not just my marriage, but my dignity, my future, the company, the family. He thought if he humiliated me enough, you'd regret leaving it all to me. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. He really thought he could win, thought he could break me. I exhaled, long and slow. But he was wrong. And now? I'm going to make sure he pays for everything he's done. The words settled in the quiet of the room, hanging there between us. I knew my father probably couldn't hear me, but that didn't matter. I needed to say it out loud. I needed to make a promise, not just to him, but to myself. Because Nathan and Jessica weren't just going to walk away from this. They weren't going to win. I sat there for a long time, just watching my father breathe, letting the weight of it all settle in. Then, finally, I stood, rubbing a hand down my face as I prepared myself for the next step. There was still so much to do. First, I had to make sure my father's business stayed mine, locked down so tightly that Nathan wouldn't even have a chance to try something. That meant contacting the company lawyers, getting the paperwork in order, ensuring that whatever Nathan had been planning behind my back was completely dismantled. Second, I had to deal with Jessica. She thought she could walk back into our home after her little weekend getaway and find everything exactly as she left it. She had no idea that while she was pretending to visit her parents, I had been systematically erasing her from my life. The locks were changed, her things were packed, and her access to our shared finances was completely revoked. She had nothing left to hold on to. No money, no home, no control. And that was just the beginning. Pulling out my phone, I scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I had been debating calling all day. It rang twice before a sharp, no-nonsense voice answered. "This is Rachel." I took a breath. "Rachel, it's me. I need you to move forward with the divorce papers, and I want them served in the most public way possible." Rachel, my lawyer, let out a small hum, clearly unsurprised by my request. "I take it things have escalated?" "You could say that," I muttered. "I also have some evidence you might want to look at." There was a pause before she spoke again, her tone shifting into something colder, more calculating. "What kind of evidence?" "Video," I said simply. "Clear as day." Rachel exhaled, and I could hear the sound of papers shifting in the background. "Good," she said. "That'll make this much easier. How ruthless do you want to be?" I didn't even hesitate. "Make sure she walks away with nothing." There was a beat of silence before she responded, and when she did, I could practically hear the smirk in her voice. "I can do that." Hanging up, I felt something settle in my chest, a dark, unwavering sense of purpose. This wasn't just about ending my marriage. It was about making sure Jessica felt every ounce of the betrayal she had inflicted on me. By the time I was done with her, she wouldn't just lose me. She would lose everything. By the time Jessica pulled into the driveway, I was already waiting. I had positioned myself in the living room, sitting on the couch with my phone resting in my palm, the recorded evidence of her betrayal just one tap away. Every single one of her belongings was packed neatly into suitcases, stacked by the front door like an eviction notice she hadn't yet received. The locks had already been changed, the financial accounts locked down, and her access to our shared credit cards was revoked. She was about to realize that her life as she knew it was over. I heard the car door shut, the sound of her heels clicking against the pavement as she made her way toward the house. She was probably expecting to walk in and be greeted like nothing had happened, thinking that she still held control over the situation, that she could weave some elaborate web of lies and gaslight her way out of this. She had no idea. The second she tried to open the door and found it locked, I heard the confusion in her voice as she muttered something under her breath. Then came the rapid beeping of the keypad as she attempted to enter the passcode. Her passcode, which no longer worked. I watched through the peephole as she frowned, visibly annoyed, before pulling out her phone to call me. A moment later, my phone vibrated on the coffee table. I let it ring. She knocked. I still didn't move. Then, Finally, frustration took over, and her voice rang through the door. Babe, why is the door locked? I took my time before finally standing, walking toward the door with deliberate slowness, letting her feel the weight of the silence. When I unlocked it, I pulled it open just enough to look her in the eyes, keeping my expression unreadable. Jessica's lips parted as if she was about to launch into some pre-rehearsed excuse, but before she could get a word out, her eyes flickered past me, to the packed suitcases behind me in the hallway. Her entire expression shifted. "What the hell is this?" she demanded, her voice sharp, her eyes narrowing as she stepped forward. I didn't move. I simply held my phone up and tapped the screen, playing the video. She didn't need to watch more than 2 seconds before her face drained of color. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. "Go ahead," I said, my voice calm, too calm. "Try to explain it." Jessica blinked rapidly, her hands curling into fists before she forced herself to laugh, though it came out strained. "Oh my God, you were spying on me," she scoffed, as if that was the real issue here. "That's so messed up. You're actually insane." I stared at her, unimpressed. "You were dancing half-naked for my brother, Jessica." She hesitated for just a fraction of a second before shaking her head. "You're taking this out of context," she said quickly, her tone shifting, adapting, trying to regain control of the situation. "It was nothing. We were just messing around." "Messing around?" I repeated, my jaw tightening. "Is that what you call it?" Her eyes darted to the suitcases again, realization sinking in deeper, her brain struggling to catch up. "Wait, hold on," she said, forcing a small laugh. "You're not actually serious, are you? You're not kicking me out over this? Babe, come on. We've been through worse." I almost laughed. "Worse?" I echoed. "Tell me, Jessica, when exactly have I ever done something like this to you?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. "Yeah," I muttered. "That's what I thought." She sighed dramatically, placing a hand on her hip. "Okay, fine. Maybe it looks bad, but you're being completely irrational. This doesn't have to mean anything. We can talk about it. We can fix it." "There's nothing to fix," I interrupted, my tone cold and final. "We're done, Jessica." That was when the desperation kicked in. "No," she said quickly, shaking her head, her breathing picking up. "No, you don't get to just throw me out like this. You're being emotional. We need to sit down and talk like adults." I stepped aside and gestured toward the suitcases. "You have everything you need. I suggest you leave before I make this even worse for you." Jessica's face twisted into something ugly, the fake sweetness disappearing in an instant, replaced with pure, seething rage. "You can't do this to me," she hissed, stepping closer, her eyes burning with resentment. "You don't have the right." "I have every right," I cut in, my voice dropping. "Because this is my house, Jessica. My money. My life. And you? You just lost the privilege of being part of it." For the first time, she looked genuinely afraid. "You're making a mistake," she whispered. "You'll regret this." I tilted my head slightly, studying her. "The only thing I regret is not seeing you for who you really were sooner." Jessica's lips trembled, her fingers twitching at her sides as if she wanted to lash out, to scream, to do something to make me break. But I just stood there, watching her, waiting. And then, finally, she realized she had lost. With a sharp inhale, she turned on her heel and stormed toward her car, shoving her suitcases into the trunk with more force than necessary. When she slammed the door shut, she spun back around to face me, her expression filled with fury. "You're pathetic," she spat. "You think you're winning here? You're just a loser who got lucky. And now, you'll be alone, miserable, and you'll come crawling back, begging me to take you back." I smiled. "No, Jessica," I said. "I'll be free." Her face twisted, but she didn't say anything else. Instead, she climbed into her car, started the engine, and peeled out of the driveway, disappearing into the night. I let out a slow breath, standing in the doorway for a long moment before finally stepping back inside, locking the door behind me. She was gone. For good. And for the first time in a long time, I felt lighter. Jessica was gone. Her car had disappeared down the street, her furious parting words still echoing in my ears, but I wasn't thinking about her anymore. My focus had already shifted to the last loose end that needed to be tied up, Nathan. He had been the architect behind this entire mess, the one who had not only taken my wife but had tried to take everything from me. My dignity, my future, my inheritance. He had underestimated me, convinced himself that I was weak, that I would crumble the moment I found out about his betrayal. But tonight, he was about to realize just how wrong he was. I grabbed my jacket and headed to my car, my body humming with a cold, steady determination as I drove toward my parents' house. Nathan had no idea what was coming, no idea that I had already put the final nail in his coffin. He thought he still had a chance to manipulate, to weasel his way out, to twist the situation in his favor. He was in for a hell of a surprise. When I arrived, I saw his car parked in the driveway. He was still here. Good. I wanted him to see this firsthand. I walked up to the front door and let myself in without hesitation. My mother was still at the hospital, which meant Nathan was alone. I found him in the living room, sprawled on the couch, a drink in his hand, looking far too comfortable for someone whose entire life was about to come crashing down. He barely glanced up when I walked in, just smirked like he still had the upper hand. "Well, well," he drawled, setting his glass down on the coffee table. "Did Jessica finally cry her way back into your good graces? Or did you come here to beg for an apology?" I didn't say a word. Instead, I pulled out my phone, tapped the screen, and turned up the volume. The recording of Jessica and Nathan played loud and clear, echoing through the room. His smirk vanished. I watched as his expression shifted, first confusion, then realization, then something close to panic as he listened to the damning evidence. The sound of his own voice, the unmistakable laughter, the sheer disrespect that had been on full display when they thought no one was watching. When the video ended, I tucked my phone back into my pocket and met his gaze, my expression unreadable. "You really thought you were going to get away with this, didn't you?" Nathan recovered quickly, forcing a smirk back onto his face, though I could see the tension in his jaw. "So what?" he scoffed. "You're going to cry to Mom and Dad about it? Newsflash, big guy, you already won. They gave you everything. What more do you want?" I stepped forward, my tone cool and measured. "I don't want anything," I said. "But you? You're about to lose the one thing you do have left." Nathan's eyes narrowed slightly. "What the hell are you talking about?" I let a small, knowing smirk cross my lips. "Dad's company." The words hit him like a slap. I saw the way his body stiffened, the flicker of unease in his expression. He didn't know. He didn't know what I had already set in motion. I took another step forward. "You see, I had a little chat with the board this morning," I continued, my voice dripping with satisfaction. "Turns out, they don't take too kindly to a man who's been actively trying to undermine the very family he was supposed to support. And since you don't actually own any shares, and since your only real connection to the company is Dad's goodwill, it wasn't hard to make them see reason." Nathan shot to his feet, his face twisting in anger. "You son of a bitch," he snarled. "You think you can just—" "I don't think," I cut in, my voice sharp. "I know." I let the silence stretch between us, let him fully absorb the reality of what had just happened. He was finished. The board would never approve him for anything now. The company was closed to him. The inheritance he had been so sure was his, the future he had thought he could steal from me, was officially out of reach. Nathan let out a sharp, bitter laugh, running a hand through his hair as he paced in agitation. "You're really enjoying this, aren't you?" he muttered, shaking his head. "You think this makes you the better man?" I shrugged. "No, but it makes me the man who finally stopped putting up with your bullshit." He turned on me, his face red with fury. "You think I care?" he spat. "Fine. Take your precious company. Take your stupid little life. But you'll never be half the man Dad was, and you sure as hell will never be me." I just smiled. "That's the point." Nathan let out a string of curses under his breath, grabbing his keys off the table before storming past me toward the door. He yanked it open, pausing for half a second as if expecting me to stop him. I didn't. Instead, I gave him one last parting gift. "Oh, by the way," I added casually, "Jessica? She's homeless now. She might be looking for a place to stay." Maybe you two deserve each other. Nathan stiffened, his shoulders rising slightly before he let out a harsh laugh. She's your problem now? I shook my head, my smirk widening. No, she's not. He didn't have anything else to say after that. Nathan stormed out, slamming the door behind him. And just like that, it was over. I stood there for a long moment, just breathing, letting the weight of it all finally settle. Everything that had been stolen from me had been reclaimed. Jessica was gone. Nathan was ruined. My father's legacy was intact. And me? For the first time in a long time, I felt free. Weeks passed, and my father recovered slowly, regaining his strength little by little. I took over the company, ensuring that the damage Nathan had tried to cause was undone, making the necessary changes to protect my family's legacy. My mother, despite her pain, finally saw Nathan for who he truly was, and though it hurt her, she accepted the truth. Jessica tried reaching out once. A long, desperate text about how she had made a mistake and how she missed me. I never responded. I simply blocked her number and moved on. And as for me, I wasn't alone. Through everything, there had been one person who had stood by my side, offering quiet support when I needed it most. A friend who had always been there, even when I had been too blind to see her. And now, as I sat across from her at dinner, watching her smile as she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, I realized something. My past was over, and my future? It was just beginning. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe to Cheating Storytelling so you never miss an update on more jaw-dropping real-life stories. Catch you in the next video.